So punishment in the Russian army means death. According to a Russian soldier, you can be sent into the assault units, quote, literally for everything. Catch a soldier with a smartphone, to the assault units. Dead in 3 days. So this is an account from a Russian soldier that said he signed a contract in 2024 that gives us an interesting glimpse into these assault units in Russia that are sustaining, without a doubt, the heaviest casualties of the war. These are the individuals moving forward, being hunted down by Ukrainian drones 24/7. This was published on the Telegram channel Frontline Officer, and I'll have this full post linked in the description below, where he says, quote, "Hello, I'm writing to you from the front. I'm a volunteer with a contract from 2024. Yesterday, you raised what, in my opinion, is a key issue for the course and outcome of our special military operation, the preservation of personnel. More broadly, the attitude towards a soldier's life, the main resource of war. Everyone today clearly understands the harsh nature of the war, where, in fact, there are two castes of participants." And he goes on to explain that in these two groups, you have the soldiers that are going to die very quickly, the assault troopers, and then or the stormtroopers, and then you have the people that are set to live through this war. They're going to be a little bit further back in more cushy jobs. He talks about the stormers, as he refers to in the assault units. He says they're located on the front line, in that very kill zone where the enemy, with all means at his disposal, 24/7 hunts us, trying to, quote, kill as many Russians as possible. Stormers are those who, despite everything, go forward and capture those bits and pieces that our top command then so proudly reports to the political leadership. These are the individual Russian soldiers that we see video after video of moving forward, trying to make it through that kill zone, that no man's land that, depending on the area, can be anywhere from 5 to 30 kilometers deep, navigating minefields, Ukrainian drones, artillery, and more to try to penetrate through Ukrainian positions. Those are the stormtroopers. They have a very short lifespan, highlighted by this specific soldier. He says, quote, "In the 5th year of the war, a Russian soldier's life is still, for some commanders, a cheap bargaining chip, which can be sent to the stormers just a month after signing a contract. And in the first combat mission, they're lost in action. Like my fellow soldier Nikita Donzov, a young Moscow guy, a volunteer who went missing on January 27th near Kupiansk on one of his first missions." And he talks about how these storm units have gone from their traditional infantry assault and a means of trying to take more territory to a punishment within the Russian military. He says, "We're increasingly getting people as a punishment in our unit. What if we're not stormers, but punishment battalions? In the absence of normal disciplinary practice and the rule of law, the only real punishment on the front now is being sent to the stormers, literally for everything. Catch a soldier with a smartphone, in the stormers, dead in 3 days, killed. Caught by military police without proper orders, in the stormers, dead in a day, killed. Didn't extend the contract, in the stormers. Didn't sign the contract, in the stormers. Lost a reconnaissance drone. Go to the enemy yourself, in the stormers. Consider them killed." Everything. It's the form of punishment right now in the Russian military. They know. It's not a surprise when the commanders push their guys out there and say 10 kilometers to the Ukrainian position, good luck. They know that the likely outcome there is death. We've talked in recent videos about how Russian soldiers that have been captured talk about how they're not permitted to go back. And if they try to retreat, even if they're out of food, out of water, out of ammunition, out of radio contact, or even significantly wounded, they're liable to be shot by their own commanders. It's wild, the scenario that these Russian soldiers are constantly put in. They say, why is it almost always killed? Because completely unprepared for storming actions, people are immediately transferred to combat units, where there is a wild expenditure of personnel, and there's no time or opportunity to train them there. Onto the rotation for 7 kilometers through drones, artillery, and mines. As in, they are going through these soldiers so fast that there's no, they might get their initial training at some point, but by the time there's levels to training. Right? Anybody that joins the military, for the most part, you're going to get that basic level of training that can be done in the rear, basic marksmanship, first aid, all of that stuff. Then as you move towards a war zone, and this is not unique to Russia and Ukraine, but historically how this has played out, as you get closer to the war zone, you start to become trained on more current tactics, right? So things that are applicable to keep you alive and survive in that combat environment. The last level is when you're at your actual unit. And we hear stories about this from Ukraine all the time, where guys, they learn how to survive in Donetsk once they're with their unit deployed on the front. And it's a little bit different than what they learned in the rear, and it's a little bit different than what they learned from, say, NATO trainers. What this guy is saying is that there's no time to do that. When they get to their forward unit, they are sent immediately into the assault. There's no additional training, and you can kind of see why. I mean, it seems pointless from a commander's point of view. These guys are going to die no matter what. Why even waste time trying to train them at that point? He says, although any stormer will tell you that you can only become a real stormer after weeks of training and an adaptation period when a person gets used to the kill zone and feels it. And this is where it's worth stressing that there are still very competent assault units in the Russian military. Very effective, very professional assault units that can do a lot of damage in the war zone. That's not every one of these assault units, and there are plenty of them. We have to look at some of the areas that have seen kind of the highest level of Russian casualties, probably in the Pokrovsk direction comes to mind, where they're just throwing bodies forward, and there's not enough time for these guys to get trained and become proper professional soldiers. He says it turns out that a citizen who voluntarily chose to serve his country, fulfilling the highest duty, ends up in an environment where he is a nobody, a disposable material, literally. And if he's not satisfied with something or he says something about it, then what? Right, into the stormers and killed. And he wraps up by saying, sorry, I'm just upset, but I don't want to be silent anymore. Pretty wild, right? Again, we don't have a lot of insight into these storm assault units, but the little bits of insight that we do have are from groups like the I Want to Live project, where after Russian soldiers are captured, they'll interview them to find out like what is actually happening inside of the Russian ranks. The United Nations even did a report just last week, I think it was, where they interviewed Russians in captivity to find out like what is happening there. And the United Nations looked at those reports and said there are human rights violations happening in the Russian army. Like it's insane. It's crazy that we're seeing this in 2026. And as we mentioned in previous videos, this is not the kind of thing that causes a military to collapse tomorrow, next week, next month, or even next year, but it is unsustainable over the long term. These people are going back into Russian society if they survive. And think about the environment they're being put in, right? Being forced essentially at gunpoint, being punished for having a cell phone, being sent to their death for having a cell phone. Those people, if they live, whoever does live, even the ones that aren't being sent out on the assault, but the ones sitting on the assault, or they know this is happening, they're going back to reform into Russian society. That is broken. That is going to be a problem Russia has to deal with for years and years to come. Now, with those heavy losses in these storm assault units, we are seeing Russia start to move a little bit towards more armored assaults. It's definitely ticked up in recent days, and we got a couple videos of them trying to carry these out in a couple different areas at the front. But first, I owed you guys an update on a fundraiser we have going right now with Ziggis Paw. We're about $31,000 into a $50,000 goal to provide lightning medium-range strike drones to the 26th Artillery Brigade. And the reason that this is important, and we've worked with Ziggis Paw before, great organization. We've worked with the 26th before, great unit. The reason this is important, as we've talked about in recent videos, these howitzers often are not able to get close enough to the line of contact to engage enemy forces, right? Drone range has become further than artillery range. Cannon, for the most part, sometimes rocket artillery. So these artillery units are cross-training their operators to become drone pilots and start serving kind of the same purpose. They're still engaging Russian targets, but instead of with their, in this case, Crab howitzers, they're doing that with medium-range strike drones, specifically the Lightning. On top of that, through this fundraiser, we've got an interview coming in the next couple days with the manufacturer of these drones to talk about the unique capabilities and why so many units are using this as that medium-range strike option. So for those interested and able, the link to contribute to this fundraiser will be in the pinned comment and description below. Now, we mentioned that we're starting to see more of these Russian armored assaults attempted in a couple different areas of the front, and we should expect to see an increase in this through spring and into summer. A couple different videos came out in the last 24 hours here. The first from the 7th Rapid Response Corps, where they say on the so-called Russian large-scale offensive across multiple directions, this is what it looks like in the area of Hershny. So this is just northwest of Pokrovsk, where the enemy deployed 13 units of motorized equipment, all of which were destroyed. They say at the same time, Russia attempted to break through in the area of Minograd using 2 MTLB vehicles. They met the same fate. The 7th Air Assault Corps, together with the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade, stopped these enemy attempts. This one unit says over the past 24 hours, they killed 104 Russian soldiers, eliminated 104 Russian soldiers, including 79 killed, and 22 units of motorized equipment and 3 units of armored vehicles. Again, starting to see an uptick in these armored vehicles. If you go back like a month or two, it just wasn't a thing at all. Very, very rare. And in the last couple weeks, it's been almost every day, there's been another armored assault attempted by Russia. We got another one here, also from the 7th Rapid Response Corps, a little further, the 81st Airborne Brigade, where they talked about an MTLB with a landing force and motorcycles was destroyed. And look at the motorcycles here being used as kind of a diversionary force. That sucks. Imagine getting that as your tasking. Kind of try to divert attention away from the MTLBs and just get, hammered with Ukrainian drones. This one took place in the Sloviansk direction. They say Russians made an unsuccessful attempt to break through the defense in the units of the 81st Airborne Brigade using a rigged MTLB, 4 motorcycles, and several small groups of infantry. They say, according to preliminary information, the Russian equipment left the occupied city of Seversk. They tried to bypass the positions of the paratroopers from the flanks. The main attack of the enemy was carried out with the help of the MTLB, and on the opposite flank, the Russians used motorcycles and small groups to distract attention. After the start of the assault, the crews of the BMPs of the 81st Airborne Brigade and adjacent units immediately reacted and destroyed the enemy's MTLB with a landing force, as well as the enemy's live forces on motorcycles. Work is underway to identify and destroy the remnants of enemy infantry, which is moving on foot in groups of 2 to 3 people. And they note, with the onset of warm weather, Russia will increasingly make attempts to break through, looking for weak points in the defense of our units. We should expect those attempted breakthroughs, small scale, no doubt, to be more and more armored assaults. The reason we're seeing that is the toll that these attacks are taking on the infantry is staggering. And we've seen Russian losses spike in the last few months. They cannot continue. They are not making sufficient gains for the losses of infantry. Even Russia, as big as they are, they do not have unlimited manpower. And it has been, there's no valuable trade-off at all with just sending individual infantry units forward. And then once they do make it forward, they don't have anywhere near the resources to continue an attack. So we're likely to see more of the armored assaults where they try to retain that firepower closer to the front so they actually can push into Ukrainian territory and then exploit any breakthrough that they're able to achieve. That is probably in the cards here in the next couple weeks and months. But that's all we got for now. Again, for those interested in Able, the link to contribute to the fundraiser with Ziggis Paw supporting the 26th Artillery will be in the pinned comment and description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.